What is happening, everybody? A little bit of a different version of NBA Live for Lock, probably even more different than you guys realize, because usually on Sundays, it's Matt and Emac on the show. Emac had to call out today. Josh filled in for Emac, sort of, but then Josh got food poisoning late last night, so Josh had to cancel the strategy show, and then I canceled some dinner plans that I could come in here and chop it up, talk some NBA DFS with Matt, answer your guys' questions. So do us a favor here. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's the easiest way to support us. You could also support us by signing up for any of the packages that we have here at Stokastic.com. Links down below in the YouTube description box, or go and check out any of our link join offers. So if you guys want to sign up for any of our affiliate partners that are on screen here right now, and whether you live in a state that has legalized sports betting, or maybe it doesn't, you just have access to pick them, we've got a variety of options for you to choose from. If you sign up for any of these partners, it has to be through our link down below. You get 1 free month of core access for any sport of your choosing. And for NBA, that's going to cover you just about through the end of the NBA regular season. So check that out down below in the YouTube description box. Matt, how's your weekend going?
It's going pretty well. Nothing special or exciting, which is always good news in my household. So it's going well. I love this Sunday show because there really isn't NBA content throughout the industry except for Josh's strategy show when he does it. So we're kind of the lone man standing on Sundays, and I enjoy it. So I'm excited to break this slate down with you.
Yeah, seeing some people already in the chat right there. We got one guy, Dirty O, says sad Chama noises. Yeah, for me, we watched the UFC fight last night, or the card in its entirety, if you were able to, because ESPN Plus wasn't working yesterday. UFC had to end up giving away the pay-per-view for free. It was the only way that people were going to be able to watch it last night. That was a fight. You could see why it was one that they didn't want to book. Alex Pereira taking on Magomed Ankalaev, because clearly that was a pretty poor matchup for Pereira, and I thought Ankalaev won that fight pretty handily. Probably could have won it even easier had he implemented a little bit smarter of a game plan from the start, but you can never count on him to do that. But all that aside, Matt, we've got tonight's NBA slate to talk about here. We've already got a handful of players ruled out, but as per usual at this point in the season, we got a handful of other guys who we are still waiting on status updates on. And also, I like the way the games are staggered today. We've got a 7 p.m. Eastern time game, a 7:30 p.m. Eastern time game, 2 8 p.m. games, a 9 p.m. game, a 9:30 p.m. game. So game's going to be pretty spread out tonight. As far as players who are questionable, Denny Avdija is questionable, Rudy Gobert is questionable, Andre Drummond is questionable. I see we already have a question about Drummond in Discord, so we could touch on that. Of the players who are questionable here, which one do you think is going to be most important to your lineups?
It's a good question. Probably Drummond, just because he looks like such a good play if he's in. You don't have necessarily like the trickle-down effect that you do when some other guys are questionable, but he's a pretty big one just for himself because he looks like a great play. How about yourself?
So the Gobert one isn't going to matter too much for me. Just, I don't even know what the hell the deal is here, where it's like comes back from injury sort of, but then injury maintenance. So he actually hasn't played a game yet. So I don't know exactly what the deal has been there with him. And same deal today. He's questionable due to injury maintenance. As far as Andre Drummond goes, just so many guys out for the Philadelphia 76ers. He looks pretty good if he's in, but if he isn't in, then we have to talk about how many minutes can Yabusele potentially play. And then also you got a matchup here, which should be a really good one on paper against a Utah team who is, I mean, they're trying to avoid wins like it's the plague, this Utah team. It's not as bad. Did you see? I assume you caught the end of the Raptors game last night. I've never seen a team go out of their way to try to lose in a more aggressive fashion.
Yeah, it's sad. I don't even really get it with these bottom teams anymore because I think they're all like locked into that bottom three. I don't know the details of whether it actually pays off to be the lowest seed or the lowest record in the. Okay, so it is like the group of three or whatever it is pretty much set with Utah, Washington. I think Charlotte's in there. It's sad. It's NBA DFS though. Like you think about it, it's the only sport where you get guys out like this and other guys just like become must plays. Look no farther than a guy like Najee Marshall for Dallas, who all of a sudden is going to be like a 8K player because he's putting up 25 and 15 every day because they got no one else. That's the situation we have in Utah and Philly, frankly. So that game looks really, really appealing.
I'll never forget. I won my 7th grade yearly fantasy basketball league on the shoulders of Walter Herman when the Charlotte Bobcats at the time shut everybody down. So, it's
That is a
stuff that happens.
throwback.
It is certainly stuff that happens at this point in the season. And I know that people understandably why they get upset about some of the shitty rosters that teams are throwing out on, like a night to night basis in some of these scenarios. With that said, though, I've been on a great stretch of DFS play as of late. And I think a lot of it has to do with just the fact that it's been a lot of good value plays. There's been a lot of good late swap scenarios. And I feel like this is a part in the season where, despite some of the frustrations, I actually think that this yields like the biggest advantages you could have as an advantage player in DFS.
I completely agree. And I'm also playing pretty well right now. And I think for me, it's a combination of what you said with like the uncomfortable value. And also I've noticed recently a lot of my really successful nights have been when I've played a lot of a certain team, 4 or 5 players from an individual team when their guys are all mispriced. And a lot of people don't want to do that. And I have no problem doing that in NBA DFS. So I think that's, I don't want to say an edge, but something we'll talk about even in the show.
Yeah, and just a ton of value for the slate tonight. You guys could see right here. Actually, you know what? Let me filter out some of the players that have.
We just got an update 20 seconds ago also.
All right. Well, never mind. I was going to select all the teams and then take out the teams that have already started so that we would have, a little bit better of an idea of just the top values for the slate. Cause guys like Brandon Williams on the projections page, obviously would have been a great play if he was on the main slate, but he isn't. But all that aside, let me refresh this and go ahead and look at some of the player projections, but also give you guys a look at the ownership as well. Some of the most popular options for tonight's slate, which this was still updated 11 minutes ago. So numbers might move around a little bit, but more or less is going to be accurate here. Here's the chalk for tonight on DraftKings. I'll read it off for FanDuel after this. Quentin Grimes, 55% on the most popular option on the slate. Then you got Kelly Oubre and Andre Drummond. Talked about how key it is going to be that he's questionable today because he's 42% projected owned. Kelly Oubre, 46% projected owned. Then you got Lonnie Walker, Justin Edwards, and Gershon Yabusele also just over 30% owned. So if you look at the most popular options on the slate, Matt, the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the top 6 most rostered players as of right now, all from the Philadelphia 76ers over on DraftKings. And then on FanDuel, kind of more of the same, where you got Quentin Grimes and Kelly Oubre. They're your 2 most rostered players over there. 62% for Grimes, 47% for Oubre, 40% ownership going to Trey Murphy, 39% to Bruce Brown, 38% to Drummond, 35% to Yabusele. And then you've also got John Morant in here at 34%. First thing I want to ask you is, with all of the ownership going to the Philadelphia 76ers, how comfortable are you with having your lineup just loaded with Philly players?
It's a tough question for me to answer because I just talked about how playing a lot of one team has been profitable for me lately. And I think on this slate, certainly that's something I'm going to consider. I also hate playing Philly. Like, I just hate this team. I hate everyone on the team. I don't want to be clouded by that from a DFS perspective. So the real answer to that is I have no problem with it. No problem playing 4 or 5 Philly in any one lineup because they look that good. Now, if Drummond is out, maybe that changes things, but then it might just boost Yabusele. So, yeah, I got no problem loading up with Philly, and I usually don't feel the need, and I don't feel the need to run back in NBA. I think that's overrated, but I like a couple of the Utah pieces too because I don't think Philly's very good. So that game just looks uber appealing, but it's hard to get away from at least having some Philly. I don't think this is a spot where I want to go like 6 deep on Philly because we don't necessarily have super cheap guys and we don't have top spend up options because Jokic isn't on this slate. Giannis is, but he's not crazy expensive. So I guess in totality, I'm fine with it. It just depends on I don't want 6 Philly, but 3 to 4, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. So something that's really tricky about the slate, I'm seeing people are bringing it up in Discord. They're bringing it up in YouTube chat as well. Nick Nurse did say that he is going to be monitoring the minutes, which once again, I hate the verbiage here because you never know exactly what it means. It would be really cool if he was like, hey, we are going to monitor the minutes of these players. Aren't the coaches always monitoring the minutes? Otherwise, they're just guessing. Like, they're just going through the game like, I guess he's played 18 minutes. No, they always, I think they're always monitoring them. So this is a very tricky situation. Lots of guys out for the 76ers. It's a great matchup. And what we have from Nick Nurse is him saying that moving forward, Kelly Oubre, Yabusele, and Quentin Grimes are going to have their minutes monitored. Wow. Our projections are updated to take that into account. And we still ended up going with 36 minutes for Kelly Oubre, 35 for Quentin Grimes, and we've got Yabusele in for 31. Andre Drummond's still questionable. I'll be honest, I really don't know exactly what to make of this, and I wouldn't be surprised if these guys still end up playing 40 minutes.
I wouldn't be surprised either because it's coach speak. It does make it easier for me to not want to spend up on the expensive guys getting ownership. Like, I get Quentin Grimes and I get Kelly Oubre getting that ownership. It's a good matchup, but like, this is the peak of their pricing tier. At least it might be. It might not be. You might have a Najee Marshall situation with Quentin Grimes. I'm not sure. But presuming that that's not the case, it's not like these guys are cheap. You're talking about minutes questions. Like, Philly is a team that needs to lose because the only way they keep their pick, I'm pretty sure, is if it's in the top 6. So they need L's more than probably any other team. They've already shut down Embiid. Paul George and Maxey are out. It's a legit concern to me. Someone who plays 3 lineups. I don't want to say I'm going to fade those guys, but I also think there's other ways to allocate your salary, and it makes me like the cheap guys like Lonnie Walker, Justin Edwards even more. But to your point, I totally think them playing 35 plus minutes to 40 is well within reason because they don't have a ton of bodies.
So here's a way that I think it makes sense to approach some of the Philadelphia 76ers because there's a wide range of outcomes here. If these guys play 25 minutes, I'm not going to be shocked. If they play 40 minutes, I'm also not going to be shocked. But somewhere in between, I wouldn't be shocked either. We do have a way that we could up the amount of variance now in our sims. This is what I think makes most sense. Up the variance for Philadelphia 76ers players today when you're running stuff through the sims. This has probably been the best use case we've had for that feature so far. Because I don't know how, unless we get further information on what the monitored minutes actually means. And also, I just pinged the data team to get a little bit of more insight on what it is that they're thinking about the situation right now. Because it's, to me, there's so many different ways it could go. This is not clear cut. This isn't clearly that these guys are fades. It's not clearly that they're the top value plays on the slate or anything like that. They are the best value plays if they play the normal minutes. I'm just trying to figure out exactly what this is going to end up meaning for tonight's slate.
Yeah, so the only thing that I agree with everything you said. The only thing I don't even want to call this a pushback, but I'll say in regards to this is ownership is still really heavy on these guys. So it doesn't seem like the field is taking that into consideration. That said, that came out 14 minutes ago. So like the field hasn't really had a chance to digest that information yet. A lot of unknown here. Like to your point, 25 minutes is within reason, 40 is within reason. I will say, me personally, I'd be much more surprised at them playing 40 than 25, just in general. I guess I would say that about anyone, usually anytime.
One other thing to think about here as well, the 76ers, where before you were talking about teams need to finish towards the bottom of the standings or what the implications might be. There's no team that needs to lose more than the 76ers. And this is
yes.
I don't even know how to describe it because high leverage isn't the right way to describe this game, but the game matters a lot for both of these teams, but it matters for the 76ers to lose. We saw, if you guys didn't see what the Raptors did last night, they were losing late to the Wizards. They took all of their best players off the court and just put in their bench. And you can't convince me that was for anything other than to try to not win the game.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think I legit said exactly what you said, that no team wants to lose more than Philly. Like, they absolutely should want to lose the rest of their games. They need a young star. The only way they can get that is if they keep their pick in the draft. So Yeah, we could easily see a situation like that. And my big problem with the Philly guys is, at least with like Scotty Barnes, like you can get there in 30 minutes. Like, I don't know if I want to play Quentin Grimes and Kelly Oubre at ownership, considering that their minutes might be really discounted here. This is true March NBA DFS.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure. So now, with that said, here's something I think that is really interesting to talk about when it comes to Philly. There is an opportunity here for somebody who is, by the way, Rudy Gobert is a game time decision due to injury maintenance. Just so many things stacked on top of each other there. But considering the uncertain minutes for Philly, and for now, let's just assume Drummond plays. He's currently questionable. We got that question in Discord. It was from, who was it? It was from Trava Patch. Asked us what we think about Drummond. I think Drummond looks really good if he plays, especially because where he's priced, he doesn't need a ton of minutes in order to have a ceiling game. Like, we've got him in for 26 minutes right now. That doesn't project for 32.5 fantasy points. One of the overall best points per dollar plays on the entire slate. And there's always the opportunity for Drummond to maybe sneak into 30 minutes if he avoids foul trouble. And when you consider who's going to be playing on the other side of the game in Utah, this seems to be a game where he should be able to avoid foul trouble. Now, all this is assuming he's able to play through the illness he's dealing with, which is very much to be determined. But under the assumption that Drummond plays, I think he looks pretty good here. Matt, the question I want to ask you is, with some of this uncertainty with the 76ers minutes, is there a guy that you think we could unearth for lower ownership off the bench? Because I do think there's an opportunity for really interesting GPP options outside of the chalk on Philly.
Yes, I definitely agree with you. I don't know about who that one guy is, though. It makes me like the Lonnie Walkers of the world a lot more. Mm-hmm. I already liked him. He's getting ownership, so he doesn't really fit into that category. But, like, I don't know. I mean, is Jalen Hood-Schifino active for this game? Like, if so, then someone like that, I mean, see what you got. Like, I don't know who it's going to be. I mean, Jared Butler, Jeff Doughton. I'm not really excited by those guys. Is there a guy you have in mind?
Yeah, so I think you bring up a really good point, which is, who are the guys who already look viable that we don't think this is going to apply to? Lonnie Walker is certainly one of them. And now I'm also kind of straying a little bit from my question, which was, like a lower owned guy to be playing here. And he's not necessarily that. Like, these are the 6 most popular players on the entire slate, these top 6 projected players from the Philadelphia 76ers. So the one thing that does make me really interested in guys like Lonnie Walker and Justin Edwards is they're not going to be restricted for any kind of reason, right? These are the guys I feel best about from the 76ers. But then also, if I'm going to go really off the board, that's where somebody like Jared Butler or Jeff Doughton do come into play, because every minute that Quentin Grimes doesn't play, every minute that Kelly Oubre doesn't play, it's going to guys like Butler, Jeff Doughton, Ricky Council. And that makes these guys really interesting leverage plays to me. Like, I'm going to make sure I have some exposure to them, and I'll even force them into some of my lineups through the Sims, just because I think there's an opportunity. I don't know how likely it is that they come through, but I'm fairly certain it's more likely than what their ownership is going to be.
Yeah, totally. And it also, like, makes me like guys like Edwards and Walker more if I'm not playing guys like Oubre or Grimes. I mean, those guys are risky fades, but I think the field is, at least as of now, not taking into consideration their minutes downside. Whereas you're right, like the cheap guys, it doesn't really affect. And also they're cheap, so it doesn't really matter. Like, how many minutes do you expect Lonnie Walker to play anyways? He's only 3,400. So yeah, Walker and Edwards have emerged as my 2 favorite pieces. I think you can certainly take shots on pretty much everyone on their roster in large field GPPs.
Yeah. And here's something else I like as a betting angle for today, Matt. And also, if you guys haven't checked out Portfolio EV, we did have a pretty big update to our algorithm the other day, which now enables us to support more markets. So that's been something I had yesterday. I was telling Matt for the show, I placed nearly 400 bets yesterday, and it was just so easy to find a lot of volume because of the updates we have with the tools, all the different markets that are included. So I was able to bet college basketball money lines, spreads, totals. Those performed really well. Check out our OddsShopper Portfolio EV tools. Get yourself a 7-day free trial if you're trying it out for the first time. Link for that is down below in the YouTube description box. But What do you think about this, Matt, as a potential betting angle? If you were to do a parlay of some of the unders on Grimes, Oubre, and Yabusele together, because while we don't know what the minutes are going to be, there's clearly a correlation in their playing time based on these three being the guys who Nurse had singled out. So if you get a scenario where all three of them end up playing like 25 minutes or something like that, then the unders start to look really good. And I'm not saying this is the most likely bet to cash or anything like that, but it's a way that you could probably put together like a 50-1 same game parlay that is going to have clear correlation to it.
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, it's not guaranteed that like if Grimes only plays 25 minutes, then, Yabusele only has to play 25 minutes, but it kind of seems like he lumped them together for a reason. Yeah. So he's got a minutes in mind for all of them. I like that idea. I mean, it's like it's correlated, but the books don't know it's correlated. So I love that. We did get an update in our projections, and it does look like the ownership has been cut down on those guys, at least a little bit. At least a little bit. We
got an ownership update from 14 seconds ago, and now that the news has, it's fun. It's still the five most rostered players are still from the 76ers, but to your point, the numbers have come down on these guys a little bit. Grimes and Drummond now just over 40%. We got Oubre at 36.5%, Lonnie Walker 35.5%, Justin Edwards at 33.5%, and so I guess Yabusele came down a good amount. Yeah, Yabusele. So he's the one who took the biggest cut because he was one of the six most rostered players. Now he's down to 21.5%. So he's the one who's most impacted by this data update. And then let's look at some of the other Philly guys. All right, so other Philly guys. Yeah, Butler 0.5% owned, Jeff Doughton 0.3% owned. It's really easy to get these guys into like if you're playing 20 lineups, play one with Butler, one with Doughton, and you're well overweight to these guys. I think that's reasonable risk management.
Yeah, totally. And one thing, going back to a question you asked me like before we got that news about Nurse, I do not feel comfortable having a ton of Philly now in my lineups. I don't want like 5-6 Philly there. I think the minutes could be spread out too much. So I actually like the Utah side more than the Philly side. I don't want to load up on Utah guys, but the two guys I do like, Keontae George and Filipowski, are priorities for me here.
By the way, I'm fairly sure I don't see anywhere that Doughton is in the G League right now. He's on the big boy roster.
Did someone say he wasn't, or?
Yeah, in chat. I'll check the injury report, but I'm pretty sure he's good to go for today. Let's see. 76ers. Yeah. Doughton should be good. And yeah, they don't have that many active guys that are on the team right here. So there's only so many directions they could go. And if they're going to limit the minutes, at least to some degree, of guys like Quentin Grimes and Kelly Oubre, then I do think it's going to be guys like Butler and Doughton that stand to play a little bit more here. Any other final thoughts that you have on the Philadelphia 76ers and this, odd situation that we have here?
Yeah, not really. I don't think so.
All right, one more time, just because we did run one more projection update, like Matt said, where we got that ownership updated. It brought the Philly guys down a little bit. I also think we smoothed out their projections a little. So I'll read this off to you guys one more time, and keep in mind, Andre Drummond is officially questionable to play still, but just under 38 fantasy point projections for Quentin Grimes and Kelly Oubre. Andre Drummond remains at 32.5. Yabusele, he is now at 29.5. Then we got Justin Edwards at 25, Lonnie Walker at 23.5, then 18.5 for Jared Butler, and just under 15 for Jeff Doughton. Let's get to some of your guys' questions. And if you haven't done yet, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Here's what we got to start us off. Thomas Ryan says, won the $4 last night with a hand-built lineup. Thanks for a couple of the tips, Belman. He's crediting you. How about that?
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take anything I can get at this point. We talked earlier about how it's been a nice DFS run for both of us. Again, no takedowns or anything, at least for me. I'm worried that's come crashing down, though, after McConnell last night. That was brutal. Part of the game, though, I benefited today in the early slate. I did not play Aaron Gordon. He got hurt early. Contests were much smaller, but, that's NBA DFS for you. So hopefully we can avoid that stuff tonight.
The next question we have here. Oh, not a question, just another happy viewer here. ALS Jets. I won Friday night. A thank yous. 100K to first. $15 entry. Stokastic Poker went off. Man, look at that. ALS Jets. Shout out. 100K win on Friday. Love to see it. Love to see us. Oh, by the way, if you guys are not in the Hall of Fame program, super easy. Just play DFS with the Stokastic avatar. Then if you have a win in a contest, you come in first or top 3 of a tournament that has at least 5,000 entries in it, add us at Stokastic HOF on Twitter. Tag me and Belman as well. We always like to see when you guys win and you get yourself some free stuff out of it. So there's no downside to you, but there is some upside. So download the avatar, put it on, whether you play at DraftKings, FanDuel, Yahoo, Owner, wherever it is you're playing, play with our avatar. Give yourself a chance to win some free prizes. 1-2 says Nurse's Tibbs Light runs guys into the ground. Yeah, I don't know that Tibbs would be, I mean, maybe Tibbs is the exception, but there's so little reason for the 76ers to run guys into the ground this year, especially because they're getting everybody hurt. Maxey hurt, Paul George hurt, Embiid hurt now. And plus they are looking to lose at this point. I mean, the other part of this too is like, who do they really care about long-term that's on the roster right now? So I hear you 1-2 in terms of Nurse's Tibbs Light, but just because he typically plays his guys big minutes, I don't think that means that it's just for sure we have to pencil Grimes and Oubre to still play close to 40.
These aren't his guys is the thing. Like, yeah, he might be like that when he's got his starting lineup in, but like Grimes and Yabusele, like, I don't know. Like, it's not like he's got trust in those guys to lead him to the promised land. I think to your original point, like those are just the guys that will probably be with the team next year. So they don't want to run them into the ground.
One other thing that I want to ask you here before we, I keep thinking we're going to move on from the 76ers, but there's such an interesting part of the slate compared to the other things that are going on today, just because I can't remember a situation we had like this where a team has the 5 most rostered players on the entire slate, and there are concerns that their minutes are going to be limited. If Drummond doesn't play today, what does that mean for other potential value from the 76ers?
I guess Adem Bona. He sucks though.
Yeah, he does.
You know, I just don't think it does that much. I think there's just too many other good plays on this slate that aren't that expensive. So I think he would become in play. I think you would definitely bump Yabusele. But mostly it just obviously would take Drummond out of play. I don't think anyone in his stead becomes like, you got to lock him in. Bona's just not that guy, unfortunately.
Yabusele would look a little bit better. It would increase his rebound rate. Also, my best guess, I think Drummond's more likely to sit than play today, just for what it's worth. Because like we said before, like the 76ers team, they don't give a shit at this point. If anything, they're more incentivized. They're certainly more incentivized to lose than win. The way the 76ers draft protections work, if they get a top 6 pick in the draft, they keep their first round pick. If they get the 7th or worst pick, they lose their first round pick. Like, what are they doing at this point in the season other than trying to lose games and try to get a better chance of getting that their first round pick coming their way? Not that Drummond massively changes their odds of winning or losing the game, but the game just matters so little that I think that it makes most sense for them to be like, hey, if you're not feeling 100%, just sit this one out.
Totally feel the same way.
And if that does end up happening, I think that Yabusele does look a little bit better. And then on top of it as well, if you do get this scenario where there is no Drummond, like you said, even though he's no good, Bona, I think has to come into play just because he is so cheap. He's still a big man who's a serviceable fantasy producer. And who knows, he could end up playing, 20 plus minutes at min price.
Yeah, he is min price. It is a good matchup. So don't love Bona, but he'd become in play. You could do worse.
All right, let's get to some of your other guys' questions from Discord. The next one is from Mike Will. Mike Will 87 says, which Utah and Philly players are good chalk for a FanDuel single entry? Yes, we'll go back over to the ownership page and we'll look at the highest projected players from the FanDuel side of things. And he wants to know who it is that he should be looking at as chalk options to be getting to on FanDuel for a single entry. So we've got Quentin Grimes, and he specifically talked about Philly and Utah. There is no real chalk from Utah. Keontae George is pulling some ownership here, 26.5%. The real chalk is on the Philly side of the game, no, not the Utah side. So of the players who are really popular from Philly, who are you most comfortable playing in a single entry on FanDuel?
It's got to be Lonnie Walker. He's cheap, and I feel good about his minutes. So Lonnie Walker.
Yeah, I'm going to. Although Lonnie Walker, let's see, he's not even popular on FanDuel, is he? He's only 15% owned. I mean, that aside, I do like Lonnie Walker a good amount. I think he's a pretty good, more contrarian play to be getting to on FanDuel. As far as the chalk options, I think I'd still play Quentin Grimes in a FanDuel single entry. You could get away from Kelly Oubre. Drummond obviously depends if he's in or out for today. That's kind of up in the air at the moment. I tend to think, like I said before, that he's going to sit. But yeah, so for me, if I'm looking at my favorite Philly players to go to on FanDuel for a single entry, Quentin Grimes, definitely going to agree with you on Lonnie Walker. Let's see, where is Edwards? Yeah, Edwards, another one. Edwards only projected for 17% ownership. I actually really like some of the ownership on the Nets guys to play on FanDuel. I mean, sub 20% ownership on Edwards and Walker. That's pretty appealing to me, Matt.
I totally agree. I mean, those are my two favorites on both DraftKings and FanDuel. On FanDuel, you're getting the ownership discount. On DraftKings, you're getting the price discount.
And here we've got Sally Sal. Sal in the Discord chat wants to know what to do with Philly. Do we lower the ROI on the starters? So your discretion, I think there's a number of different ways to go about playing it. What I'm going to do, especially when I'm making late swaps after the first set of games lock and we get a little bit of a better idea on ownership and an update on Andre Drummond. But then also, I mean, we've got our variance metric now where you could change the variance of individual players. I'm going to up the variance on all of the 76ers players for tonight's slate. That's the way I'm going to go about doing it. If you guys want to, you could just lower the ROI on them. You could do an exposure cap so that you're not overly invested in individual players. I am just going to up the variance and let the Sims do their work with a wider range of outcomes being applied to the players. Anything that you want to add to the Philadelphia 76ers and what your thoughts are in terms of approaching the starters for the slate?
No, I mean, there's a lot of unknown here. So, like, what I do doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. I think that, if you're playing 150, I think getting like what the field is getting is a smart thing to do. I know you talked about this a lot with Paul George, like not really wanting to take a stand because there's just a lot of unknown every time he steps on the court. I feel like all of Philly is Paul George today. So I wouldn't mind anyone just wanting to be with the field there. Like, because I don't really want to play the expensive guys doesn't mean that you shouldn't want to play the expensive guys because I don't know what's going to happen. No one does really.
Yeah, I definitely think that's if you want to be the most risk adverse as possible for the slate, which there are certain times where that actually can make sense in certain ways for GPPs. You can also do what Matt said. You could align yourself with the field on the chalky 76ers guys and just make the rest of the slate make or break your lineups. And then it doesn't come down to the whims of Nick Nurse and what minutes he decides to play guys as what determines the outcome of your lineups. I think that's another reasonable way to do it. A little bit is going to have to come down to a personal preference. J squared in a 25 entry max contest, 25 entry max. Trying to think what contests are 25 entry max. Maybe like that $2 on FanDuel or something. Well, neither here nor there. He wants to know, do I put a percentage own cap on all the players so you get different lineup construction? Just let the Sims tell me how much to get. Yeah, I don't change anything for 25 max compared to like a 20 max or single entry or 150 max. I'm still trying to play my best lineups in there. Like, I'm not looking at my 20 max lineups and saying, oh no, I've got 90% of this value play. I need to have less of them because I've got this amount in 150 max. I just want to play my top lineups.
I couldn't agree more. I think that was a good way to put it. Speaking of like top lineups and top players, we spent a lot of time talking about Philly, but I want to get your opinion on some other guys on this slate.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just finish answering these questions, and then I'm curious to see what questions it is that you have for me. We've got a question here. It is from Ant 8604 $. He says, Oscar is out for Utah tonight. Yes, Oscar Sheboy, he is out tonight due to an illness. So he will not be active today. Let's let me see. Do we have him?
Probably bumps Micah Potter a little bit and makes me like Filipowski even that much more.
Oh, you know what? We do have him in our projections right now. Let me double check the Utah injury report because
I never saw him out.
Yeah, he is listed out. I'll message.
That is big for the Utah, like for Filipowski, and Micah Potter's going to start popping. But Filipowski already looks like a fringe top 5 play on the slate. He'll probably look like the best play now on the slate.
Yeah, by the way, Jason just messaged me that there is an update coming to take Oscar Tshiebwe out of the projection. But yes, he is out because of an illness. So, Ant, you are correct. He is not going to be playing today. And one more question here from Mincash Merchant. He says, how does the variance value change what happens in the Sims? Like, what does variance of 2 versus 1.1 versus 1 mean? Yeah, so 1 is just going to be our neutral standard variance. If you up that number, meaning if you make it 1.5, it's going to change the range of outcomes for the players and just make them a little bit more erratic. And then the closer you get to 0, the less variance there's going to be in their fantasy score. And then the simulation runs, they're going to be closer to their actual number each time. Think of it kind of as if you guys used Fantasy Cruncher at any point in time in the past, you could up the randomness percentile there. It's kind of like that. It's creating a little bit more randomness in the players' fantasy scores. Like, it's still based on what their actual projection is and the players' normal standard deviations. But once again, the higher you move that number, the more variance there's going to be in their simulation runs. The closer the number is to 0, the least amount of variance there's going to be. The number we have it right now at 1, that's just going to be our standard variance that we typically have put in here. I'm curious now, Matt, because you had asked me before. You said there was other players you were interested in asking me about. I'm curious who in particular you had in mind to talk about.
I got 2 questions in mind when I asked that. Okay. Keontae George versus Isaiah Collier. Collier projects for 5 less fantasy points and a ton less ownership, and he's 100 less. I'm wondering if you see that big of a gap between them.
Yeah, so for the short answer is yes. Keontae George just a much better fantasy producer. Isaiah Collier, generally a lower usage guy as well. It also kind of sucks to be a guy who's relying on assists when you're playing with shitty teammates, which is something that Isaiah Collier is relying on. He's somebody who has had some pretty decent fantasy games this year. I just worry at his price point and his lack of scoring what his real ceiling is.
Totally fair. And the projections kind of call for that. So that makes sense. And then secondly, this is kind of one guy that is getting a lot of love here. He's projected to be one of the most overowned players on the slate is Julius Randle. So I wanted to just get your opinion on him in general. I think he's too cheap at 7,200. And I think that oftentimes people make too big of a deal about a singular player's ownership. Like if I play Randle, even though he's overowned, but I'm not playing Grimes and Oubre, like I'm total, ownership isn't even a question at that point. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. By the way, we do have an update that just came in for the Utah Jazz. We're going to be shorthanded today. We have as active players for Utah today, Keontae George, Kyle Filipowski, Isaiah Collier, Bryce Sensabaugh, Johnny Juzang, KJ Martin, Micah Parter, Svi Mikhailiuk, and Cody Williams. That's 9 players in total that we have active for Utah. And here are the updated projections now for the Jazz guys, where we now have Keontae George projected for 36.2 fantasy points at $6,400. Filipowski is in for nearly 35 fantasy points at $5,900. The lack of depth. Now we've got Svi in for 22 minutes. So with him at a cheap price point, he's projecting really well. Anything else that really stands out to you with these updated Utah Jazz projections, Matt?
No, not really. I think Utah looks as good or even better than I thought they would, especially the Filipowski and Keontae Georges of the world. The real interesting to me is New Orleans looks really good in that first game. At least a couple pieces do. Yeah,
and that's not going to be massively surprising because there are so many guys who are out for the Pelicans. Another team here where we've got Jamal Cain, Antonio Reeves, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl. We've got Matkovich, Bruce Brown, Jordan Hawkins, Yves Missi, Kelly Olynyk, Jose Alvarado, Trey Murphy. There's only 10 active players for the Pelicans. I mean, we're at a point in time here where teams don't have a full roster that they could field healthy. Some of it is also just teams' own discretion because you got no CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray, he's out for the season. Brandon Boston, he's probably not going to end up returning this season. Herb Jones, he's out. Zion Williamson resting today. So only a handful of guys active for the Pelicans. Matkovic, he's looking like a really good value option. Jordan Hawkins looks like a really good value option. Jose Alvarado, he is somebody as well who's looking pretty good. Now, earlier in the day, we did have a questionable designation on Jose Alvarado, but he's since been named a starter, so I'm not really all that concerned about it. Bruce Brown, he was on the injury report. He's off it. Kelly Olynyk, he was on the injury report. He's off it. Alvarado and Jordan Hawkins, that's just starting backcourt tonight for the New Orleans Pelicans. Who are your favorite players to be getting to from this team in a fairly difficult matchup against Memphis where there's definitely some blowout risk?
It's got to be Alvarado, or not Alvarado. I like Alvarado. It's got to be Hawkins for me. Cheap at 4,200. Going to step into a nice role with no McCollum, obviously no Zion. Pretty much guaranteed run no matter how this game plays out. Hawkins for me got to be the top guy. I like Alvarado too. He's a little bit more expensive. I like Murphy. He's certainly more expensive. For me, it's Hawkins. How about you?
Yeah, I'm rerunning Sims, and I'll see what it is that I get to here. I do agree with you, though. I think it is going to end up being Jordan Hawkins for me. And one other thing as well here of note when it comes to Jordan Hawkins compared to some of the other guys that you brought up there, he's allowed to play garbage time. Whereas Jose Alvarado, Trey Murphy, like these guys are coming off the court at the end of the game. I don't know that's going to be the case when it comes to Jordan Hawkins. He might be out there at the end of the game, even if they're getting their asses kicked.
He's game script proof. Like, because if it's a close game, he'll likely be out there because he's going to be playing with the starters. But if it's not, he'll likely be out there because they want to get him run. So totally agree.
All right. After I have this Sims run done, Matt, then we could go over some of our favorite players to be looking at for each position here. So also, if you guys, one time, if you haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and don't forget that if you are looking to sign up for any of the packages we have here at Stokastic.com, the absolute easiest way to do it is take advantage of our link join offer. There's a link down below in the YouTube description box. For any of our affiliate partners you sign up for, you get 1 free month of core access. You want to sign up for 3 of these, 3 free months. Fanatics Chalkboard, they were recently added. So guys, go check it out. It's the simplest way to get yourself a free subscription to the site. Also, that is going to come with access to our Discord channel. So if you want to ask any questions over the course of the shows, if you're a sub, just join Discord. You tag me, at me questions at any point in time, which I'm going to pull up right now to see if there are any questions. Nope, no additional ones here. So I'm going to get to updating my lineups with the updates that we have here for the Utah Jazz. I see we have a question in the YouTube, well, a super chat from Sam Lechner. There's no question attached to it. So let me see. Here we go. He wants to know what's a good amount of variance to use for Philly in this case today. I'm going to put them to 1.2. It's a little bit subjective. You could go higher if you wanted more or variance. You could leave it at 1. I'm thinking I'm going to go with 1.2 as the number here for myself, Sam. One other thing I want to ask you here, Matt, as I'm here updating lineups, what are you going to be doing with your pay up options for today? Because we've got all this value on the slate. It would be really interesting. I wish we would have had the Denver OKC game on the slate because then we'd have, SGA and Jokic's pay up options. We've got Giannis on the high end, but it's not exactly a dearth of options that we have to choose from. We're going to be looking to spend up with your salary, considering that we do have a lot of options to go to save salary with. We need to fill it in somewhere.
So I'm going to answer that question in 2 ways. So one, the easy way is Giannis. He's my favorite spend up option. I like this spot for Milwaukee tonight. Last night was a clear look ahead spot. They lost to Orlando at home. They've been playing good ball though. And Cleveland, despite winning 13 in a row, I've never seen a team like struggle through a win streak like Cleveland is struggling through right now. They're not playing as good a basketball, and I think they're set up to at least be in a really competitive game in this spot. Now, to be fair, I've called Cleveland to lose a couple times this year, and every time they've beaten that team by 40. So maybe that happens again tonight. But I like Giannis in what should be a competitive game here at home against a team that Milwaukee is 0-3 on the season against. I think this is a game they have circled. So I like Giannis a bit at 11-1. But the real answer for me is no spend up option at all. I think there's enough mid-tier pieces that you can pair together, not even including the Philly guys. We talked about Julius Randle. He looks great to me. Filipowski, he looks elite. Zubac, who we haven't talked about, looks like one of, if not my favorite play on the entire slate. So I think you can play a bunch of those guys and then mix in the value. It's not like we have the OKC, all those guys at 3 to 4K. We've got value, but it's like 4 to 5K is value.
Yep. Yeah, that's true as well. I don't think you necessarily have to go to one of the super expensive guys for tonight, which, I mean, we've only got 3 players who are north of 10K. You've got Giannis. You've got, never mind. You've got Giannis. You've got Harden. I guess it depends who it is that we really want to consider like the super high spend, because we still got Morant and Edwards as options as well. But, with that said, they're not like 12K guys or anything like that. So let's keep that in mind as well. But Giannis is spent up. If you have to pick one guy to roster and pay all the way up for, Giannis is the guy you're going to go with.
Yeah, he's it for me. How about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of by default, because if you have all the salary, it's like, are you going to Giannis or are you leaving $1,000 in salary on the table? It's going to be Giannis.
And it's not like the other guys like you talked about. Like there are other spend up options, but they're kind of, at least like Ant is a little bit more expensive than you'd like to spend. So there aren't any guys that are in like elite spots that you feel like, oh, this is the guy I need to go to.
Yeah. Yep. That's how I see it as well. Let's go into Discord. We've got a question from M Grizzly, who wants to know, is there anybody who I am going to be boosting for today? I'll have my Sims run should be done here in like 30 seconds or something like that. I want to know from you, Matt, anybody in particular you're looking at and saying like, hey, this is somebody who maybe our data likes but doesn't love. Do you want to make sure you get to more exposure than maybe our projections would indicate you would otherwise get to that player?
No, because the guys that I really like are the guys the tools really like. So I'm going to say no to that tonight. I love Zubac, but I don't need to do anything. Like he's going to show up a lot for me.
Let's see. So for myself, this is going to be partially injury motivated. I don't have to like force Bona into lineups or anything like that. If Drummond gets ruled out in the next, 20 minutes or something post-lock, it'll be pretty easy for me to just, run the late swap tool and make adjustments for that. However, we do have Denny Avdia questionable. So that is going to be something that I want to take into account. Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, those are 2 guys that I want to give a little bit of boost to in the event that Denny Avdia is ruled out. Don't really have to do anything for Drummond. And then I'm not going to do anything for Gobert either, just because these guys are already priced for Gobert being out. He's been out for a considerable amount of time now. But I like boosting Simons and Shaedon Sharpe just in the event that Avdia is out. And then if, you end up finding out that Avdia is in, then I'll just rerun the Sims with projections as is, and it should take care of itself. If Avdia sits, anybody in particular you would want to be targeting from Portland?
Not really. It's going to be hard to get there anyways, just because when is that game? It's the second to last game. So not really. It's not a great spot. It does open up like the, Kumara, Jeremy Grants of the world. Like if you're desperate for guys, I mean, it opens up the rest of Portland because Avdia is a usage guy. But I guess my bigger question from what you just laid out is if Gobert is in, does that affect Randall for you at all?
So keep in mind, we are currently projecting Gobert in as things stand. So to me, it's more Julius Randle is the one guy on the team because he was out himself for a little bit of time. So he's not really priced as much for the current situation. I already think he looks good as of right now with Gobert in because he's priced down from where he was before when the team was fully healthy. So with that in mind, like Randall's one guy who I already like, who I would like a little bit more if Gobert was to sit. But keep in mind, Randall already looks fine, and that's with Gobert projected in.
Yeah, so it's not the type of thing where if Gobert's in, you're going to like him less because you're accounting and the projections are for him being in. Got it.
Yeah. I mean, we've got Randall in right now for nearly 38 fantasy points at $7,200. That's already going to make him somebody who's somewhat of a priority for me. And like I said before, that's already assuming that we do have Rudy Gobert in. And if we go ahead and look at our ownership projections, which I just got updated a minute ago, we have Randall projected for 25% ownership. So not nothing, but it's, it's a modest amount of ownership. Nothing crazy. He's somebody I'm fairly positive I'll be overweight too.
Yeah, I'm definitely playing Randall in at least 2 of my 3 lineups here. So yeah, he's just way, way too cheap for his role and this matchup too. So I'm with you. I just was kind of looking for affirmation that Gobert being in wouldn't make you like him any less.
Yeah. So I've got my Sims updated now, so we could go through some of our favorite players at each position. Matt, a couple questions to answer first, though. Ethan 7 wants to know: do we like Cade tonight for tournaments? Matt, what do you make of Cade?
I always like Cade as a tournament play. My big issue with getting to him here is nothing about the matchup or price tag makes me like him, and guard spot is at a premium. I'll also say, like, he's going to be in Toumani Camara hell tonight. So, like, I don't usually take into account individual defenders, and I'm not saying don't play Cade because of that, but Camara is going to be locked on Cade here, and that is always something I'd rather avoid if I can.
The biggest issue that I have with Cade is if I'm going to be spending up today, I'm just so much more apt to be getting to Giannis. So I only have 5% of Cade in my final Sims run here. He's not somebody who's going to be in very many of my lineups. Like I said, he's in 5%. That's less than what the field has. But if I'm spending all the way up, the guy that I'm getting to is Giannis on the high end. It's not Cade.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, really the only thing that isn't to me about Cade is that he's 11% owned, but that's it.
Giannis isn't even, I mean, it's, he's
that's part of the reason I love Giannis too. Yeah, you're right.
Like Giannis is 2x the ownership of Cade, but it's not like he's uber chalky or anything like that either. So for me, Giannis is going to be the guy who I get to the most if I'm spending up. Next question here we've got from Chacho Macho. I like that name, by the way. Chacho Macho wants to know.
Same.
Yeah. Cade and GTA or Harden and Keontae George. Harden and Keontae George for me. Harden and Keontae George.
Same.
And then M. Grizzly is asking, do you think it's a bad idea to be overweight to the field on guys from the first game? No. I mean, there are players to like from the Pelicans. Like, for sure, Jose Alvarado is one of my favorite options on the entire slate. Actually, right now, you and I, if we go through our favorite players at each position, Jose Alvarado is my favorite point guard to a roster. So I don't have any issue with going pretty heavy on Alvarado. Keep in mind as well, so we still have Andre Drummond as questionable. I have a lot of exposure to the 76ers right now. If Drummond is ruled out, it's not like I'm going to have a lack of flexibility to maneuver around lineups because I have a shit ton of exposure to the 76ers. As long as you have a lot of Philly exposure, you're pretty well set up. I mean, if you have like 100% of Alvarado and you got like all of the Trey Murphy, all right, maybe that's a little bit of an issue, but the way my lineups are looking right now, I have nearly 50% exposure to Jose Alvarado, and it doesn't seem problematic for my flexibility. Based on what you had said before about the Pelicans, I assume that you're also not concerned about getting exposure there?
Yeah, no, I'm not concerned about it. And I think that, with Philly being the second game that locks, like, it won't be hard.
Yeah, for sure. And we should know fairly soon if Drummond's going to be in or out. I will assume that news is coming in 7 minutes, 1 minute after the first game locks, just kind of based on experience of how these things usually go. We'll see, though. M. Grizzly also says, thanks to you guys for doing the show on Sunday. Appreciate it as always. Thank you very much for the message there, M. Grizzly. I like doing the content. Like when you guys show up, because if you guys didn't show up, ask questions and all that, then we wouldn't have a show to do. So the reason we have a show to do is because you guys watch it on Sundays. Matt, let's go through some of our favorite players to be getting to at each position. Let's do a just favorite guy at the position and then a contrarian option at the position. So for me, at point guard, favorite guy is going to be Jose Alvarado and then Ja Morant as a contrarian option.
I'm going to say Keontae George and as my contrarian option, I'll say this is out there. We haven't even talked about this guy, Damian Lillard.
Okay. At shooting guard for me, if I'm going to be going with a popular option, Lonnie Walker. And then as a more contrarian option at shooting guard, as of right now, Svi Mikhailiuk, although I don't have like a ton of contrarian shooting guards. I mean, you got a lot of the guys who are popular at shooting guard look like pretty reasonable options. But my favorite chalk one, Lonnie Walker, contrarian option for me. Svi, yourself at shooting guard?
I'm going to say my favorite option is Jordan Hawkins. My favorite contrarian option is Keon Ellis.
Okay. Small forward, my favorite overall option, Justin Edwards. My favorite contrarian option at small forward. A contrarian small forward. This is also Svi for me. It's hard to have guys who are like around 10% owned on a small slate to like love at each position with some of the MP and make it different guys. So I'll go with Svi again at small forward.
I will say Justin Edwards, and then this guy isn't crazy contrarian, but he's not too popular either. Kawhi Leonard.
Okay. Power forward for me. Overall favorite option, I will go with Giannis. And then as a contrarian option, I mean, Yabusele is sub 20% owned. I'm overweight to him. Then there's also the potential for Drummond to be out, although the field is going to be there in that scenario. All right, Makovich for me at 3,900.
Yeah, that was going to be my contrarian guy too. But my popular guy, actually, I'm going to say two like non-Uber chalk guys, Giannis and Julius Randle.
Okay. At center for me, if I'm going with somebody popular, as of right now, Andre Drummond, subject to change if he ends up getting rolled out. As a contrarian option, there's blowout risk in this Memphis Pelicans game. In games that are lopsided, Zach Edey usually plays the entire fourth quarter. So him at 11% ownership, you could see a scenario where he gets extended run and plays pretty well.
Yeah, totally. For me, it's going to be Filipowski and Zubac. I don't think you have to get too crazy on this slate. Like, it's a lot of NBA DFS, and DFS in general is, half of it is who you don't play as opposed to who you do play. So again, if you're fading some of the chalkiest guys on the slate, you don't need to get on an island with the guys you do play.
Yep. For sure. Seen some people in the chat as well. Choke Hold'em saying he's most underweight to Oubre and Grimes. It's a reasonable stand to take. I ended up upping the variance, like I said I was going to do before. It got me pretty much in line with these guys. I've got Kelly Oubre and Quinn Grimes basically the exact same ownership as what the field has. I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that being the case. I just don't know what to make of the minutes. I'll have my lineups made or broken elsewhere. My favorite guys to roster from the 76ers, Matt had said it before, but Lonnie Walker and Justin Edwards for me. If you guys have any other questions for us, it's a pretty quick hour. Hit me up in the Discord, and I'll be on the lookout for any questions here. Matt, any final thoughts in the closing minute here?
My thought that I want to get out there and hear what you have to say is I'm a little bit worried that because of this news now, Grimes and Oubre come in lower owned than we're even projecting, with people just taking the I don't want to play those guys approach. Now, I still think they come in like about where they're projected, but I don't think it's out of the realm for people to just be like, I don't want to play these guys as much as they would have before.
We got one final ownership update here, and the numbers are lower than they were at the top of the show. I tend to think this is about what it's going to be. Maybe if they were still like the 60% numbers they were projected for before. But I mean, Grimes at 41%, Drummond TBD, just because there's, we need an update on him. But then you got Oubre 35%. Yabusele is Yabusele is only 17% owned. So I don't know that he's going to be that much lower owned than projected, but Grimes 42%, Oubre 35%. Those are the only three names that we got for guys whose minutes are going to be monitored, whatever that's supposed to mean.
I could actually see Yabusele becoming way more popular depending on the Drummond news. So it was more speaking on the other two, because you're right. Like Yabusele is already pretty low owned. I just still think, to your point, like Oubre and Grimes still project well enough where people are going to want to play them.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening here. If you guys want to hang out and playback, watch the games. We're gonna leave playback running. I'll put the games up on in there as well. There's only gonna be one game to choose from the start because we just got the one game locking at 7 here. But yeah, if you guys want to hang out and playback, watch the games, chat amongst yourselves. Gonna leave that open, so go hang out in there. And then also, if you guys ever want to go and check out playback while we're doing live before lock, trying to make sure that there's a little bit of different content on both platforms for you guys. So we do have bets from Portfolio EV that are just going to be showing up in playback throughout live before lock. So if you guys want to have YouTube open and look at some of the DFS data, you can look at that on YouTube over the course of our shows. If you want to have playback open and look at the betting data from Portfolio EV, which we got our 7-day free trial, you guys could check out whenever. If you're signing up for the first time, that is going to be open for you guys over in playback. Other than that, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you haven't done it, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Have a good night. See you back here tomorrow, guys.